Merab Dvalishvili is the bantamweight GOAT. Last night he defeated Sean O'Malley, the first submission win in Merab's UFC career and the first submission loss for Sean O'Malley's MMA career. This was a really fun fight. I think Merab has really been losing that stigma that he's a boring fighter, losing all that. I know there's some haters, there's still some people who will just never ever let it go and they'll forever call him boring, even though what we saw last night and what we saw against Umar, and even what we saw in the first Sean O'Malley fight was not boring. There's nothing boring about this. In fact, I would even say the Henry Cejudo fight wasn't boring. It was literally the Jose Aldo fight pissed off a lot of people, and to this day they bring it up like he's boring. He wasn't boring against Henry Cejudo. He wasn't boring against Sean O'Malley either times, and he was for sure wasn't boring against Umar. But this fight is so impressive, and it really solidifies and cements that he is the bantamweight GOAT. I mean, the only other guy who really comes close to him is Dominik Cruz, and Dominik Cruz's era and his competition was just nowhere like Merab. And even the same guys they faced, Merab beat them, and they were some of the same dudes that beat Dominik Cruz. Henry Cejudo, for example, as we'll talk about. But in this fight with Sean O'Malley last night was just amazing. All the boxing, great boxing exchanges between the two. I was really worried about Sean's counter. I'm not going to lie. I was going for Merab in this fight, but Sean really did seem very focused and, almost humbled. He truly was humbled from the first fight. I will say that. But it didn't matter. He stopped gooning. It didn't matter. He stopped smoking weed. It didn't matter. He started to become a better family man and hang out with his wife and kids. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. Being a good person in this sport doesn't matter. Unless you're Merab, of course. But Merab chokes him out with a darce, or some are calling it a modified ninja choke. I mean, whatever it was beautiful. And seeing Sean O'Malley tap like that, and it wasn't even that close to the end of the round, I believe, when it happened. Very similar to the Kayla Harrison, Juliana Pena fight. It wasn't that close, though. That was like 5 seconds left. That was crazy. Anyway, what Merab did, he continued some of the great things that worked for him in the first fight. Every time he had him down, every time he ragdolled him, he just threw those vicious knees to the thigh, those knees to the leg that really fuck with Sean. He also, I think his striking got better, is what what I meant to say. Not just between the first Sean O'Malley fight and the Umar fight, which showed a lot of improvement with Merab striking when he fought Umar, but between his last fight with Umar and this fight with Sean, the rematch, he's for sure gotten better in the striking department. Merab has always been tricky, his striking sometimes is very tricky because of his wrestling and stuff. Sometimes he does this interesting move where he's level changing, and you don't know if he's shooting a takedown or throwing an overhand. And he's so good at tricking his opponents with that. And sometimes he'll do both, where he hits them with the overhand and then shoots the takedown and gets it. And he did it in the first Sean O'Malley fight. I'm pretty sure he did it in this fight. He did it against Umar. It's just really crazy how much he can mix up these styles. This guy is beating those allegations of being a boring fighter. I think if you're still calling Merab a boring fighter at this point, you just have personal hatred against him. Anyway, when I look at Merab's resume, when I look at Dominik Cruz's resume, I think it becomes very clear that Merab has taken Dominik Cruz's spot. I mean, we just look at this win streak starting from Marlon Moraes, which, people, quite a few people look at this, particular win streak. Obviously, he's on what is like a 13-fight win streak now. But when you start at Marlon Moraes, it's very, very impressive. I mean, Marlon is no pushover. Yeah, he competed for a title many times. I believe he was a champion outside of the UFC promotion. He was no pushover. And then beating Jose Aldo. Very impressive. Obviously some people really critiqued the way he did it. But again, Jose Aldo doesn't get critiqued for not being able to defend that. Like, Jose Aldo is supposedly one of the greatest of all time, the GOAT, one of the greatest mixed martial artists ever. But then Merab and Mario Bautista holding him against the fence with his kryptonite, really? I don't think Jose Aldo gets enough shit for that fight. So I do think that's a great win for Merab because, Jose Aldo couldn't do anything to defend it, and that's impressive. Petr Yan was a very impressive fight. Petr Yan never got going in that fight. great win. Henry Cejudo picked him up like a sack of potatoes and brought him over to Mark Zuckerberg. Everyone saw that. And then we get to these last three fights we were just talking about. Dominate Sean O'Malley for every round. You could give Sean O'Malley the fifth round in the first fight, but even then, I don't think you could give him that. I think Merab won every single round in that fight. Maybe the fifth round you could give to Sean, but I think it just Merab dominated him in that fight. And then the Umar fight, his most impressive title defense, obviously, just because Umar's undefeated, his family is undefeated. There was so much aura and just, there was a lot of aura on the Nurmagomedov camp. There really was the undefeated, aura to that. And then we look at Dominik Cruz's right now. Dominik Cruz still has one of the greatest resumes in bantamweight history. Let's not get it twisted. But, his level of competition just was not the same. Like Jose Benavidez, that was considered like a top win at that time. Now, today, Jose Benavidez, I think, would get fucking trumped in the top six. I don't think he even cracks the top 7 in today's bantamweight UFC. Now, Mighty Mouse and obviously Uriah Faber is a great win. That was a great win for that time in 2011. Mighty Mouse is another good win, even though Mighty Mouse was kind of undersized in that division, and Mighty Mouse was definitely not comfortable in that weight class, which is why he never fought in there again. So, impressive win because it's still Demetrius, DJ, so impressive. But, I don't call it as impressive as some of the wins that Merab has gotten, I would say. Now, beating TJ Dillashaw is very impressive because we know TJ was on steroids for most of his career, probably on steroids for that fight. So, very impressive win. Beating Muzazaki after a 3-year layoff. Really impressive after surgery and not knowing how Dominik Cruz was going to look, getting that first round finish. But then there's the losses to Cody Garbrandt, Henry Cejudo. Now, in hindsight, we see that Cody Garbrandt's entire style was created to fuck with Dominik Cruz, to beat Dominik Cruz, to handle that kind of pace fighter, But in hindsight, we see that Cody Garbrandt was not the most well-rounded ever. A lot of people say it's because of the knockouts and the chin that it expired and whatever. But, I also think he just was not as talented as many of us thought, and just the new generation of bantamweights, he just couldn't hang with them, to be quite honest. Henry Cejudo, now, getting KO'd against Henry Cejudo, I know some people call it an early stoppage, Dominik calls it an early stoppage, but nonetheless, what Merab did to Henry Cejudo was way more dominant and just embarrassing all around. So I would say that Merab is the bantamweight GOAT if I'm comparing these two resumes, the level of competition, and also just, I know it wasn't always Dominik's fault because of injury, but how often Merab fights. I mean, just look at that. He's always fighting, and I know he wants to fight again this year, which hopefully happens at the end of the year. I think that would be a lot of fun against Sandhagen. Maybe October, December would be a good idea. Anyway, let's talk about what is next for Suga. Let's talk about what's next for Sean O'Malley. I mean, quite frankly, I'm going to say what many people have been saying. He needs to go up a weight. He needs to go to 145. He has to become a featherweight. This guy is just not strong enough to hang with these really good wrestlers at bantamweight. He kind of had a lot of easy cherry-picked fights on his way to the top. Let's be honest. And then the Petr Yan fight, the judges, my bad, I'm a fucking idiot. The judges did Sean a huge favor with giving him that fight. Now, I think that Sean O'Malley gets steamrolled through Umar. And I think maybe he could beat a couple guys at bantamweight, maybe that. But I also think guys like Song Yadong could give him problems. And then there's other rising bantamweights that could also give him problems. I mean, I would have said that the loser, if he stays in this division, I would say maybe the loser of Marcus McGee versus Petr Yan. That would be a good matchup because, Petr Yan could get that rematch if he loses against Marcus. And Marcus, I don't know why he's getting a Petr match. That's way up, and Petr's doing another bottom bantamweight a favor by fighting that far down. He's taking a big risk with his career yet again. But if Marcus McGee, loses but puts on a good show, he should get a Sean O'Malley fight if Sean O'Malley stays at bantamweight. But I think for him, he shouldn't, because I think that it's like if you can't get through Merab and stuff, Umar's not going to be any easier. Umar is as good as Merab, I think. It was much more evenly matched between Umar and Merab than Merab's fights with Sean O'Malley. That is for sure. But here are some fighters I do think that could be fun for Sean O'Malley at 145 at featherweight. This are Suga's next potential opponents. David Onama. So David Onama, I don't know if you guys have seen his fight with Nate Lawler, but it was a barn burner. It was a lot of fun, back and forth war. His last couple fights were decisions. He's ranked, I believe, number 12 or 13, pretty low in bantamweight. So I think that would be a good fight to see where Sean is in the level, because I know the UFC are probably not going to give him this guy. They're probably going to give him somebody ranked much higher. But I think this would be a good fight to see if Sean can hang with the bantamweights. I'm sorry, the featherweights. My bad, I'm a fucking idiot. Next here, I think this one makes a lot of sense. Since Aljo is at featherweight now, let's have the rematch. Merab was talking about in the post-fight press conference that, everyone has an off night, and Aljo just had an off night this night. And to an extent, I kind of believe that, but also Aljo made the conscious decision to not really shoot for takedowns and at least not aggressively go for takedowns as he usually does in his other fights where he's a human backpack. So I do think a rematch at 145 would be very intriguing for Sterling and O'Malley. Sterling, I believe, is coming off a loss to Mosavar. I believe that was his last fight. I don't think he's fought since then. And we see that Aljo is much stronger at 145. We saw it against Mosavar. We saw the wrestling exchanges. So this could be a huge problem for Suga, especially since he didn't really utilize his wrestling skills at 135 when they fought. And Sean O'Malley, he has the confidence that he's beaten this guy. He's knocked this guy out before. He knocked him out when he was the champion, when he was at the height of his career. He can use that. That's some good motivation to carry into the fight for Sean O'Malley. So I think this is another great. I think this might be the best matchup for him next at any fight, any division. But for sure, Sean should move up and fight Aljo. I think this is a great next fight. There's another fight. I don't think it will happen, but Josh Emmett, he's right there. Now, Emmett fought Topuria. And I think this could kind of help with the marketability because you could have a lot of comparisons. Who knows if Topuria is ever going to come back to featherweight? Who knows? I don't think he physically can. But if Sean O'Malley goes out there and just knocks out, Josh Emmett, just styles on him, beats him up, doesn't get touched up, avoids the dangerous power, and just pieces and knocks him out and gets the finish, then there's going to be comparisons. Because remember, Ilia Topuria fucked up Josh Emmett. He connected so many times with significant strikes. He landed right hands, he landed hooks, but he never finished them. And near the end of the fight, in the 5th round, Josh Emmett bleeding bloody everywhere, but still fighting, still swinging with all of his might. And Topuria, Topuria said fuck it, and he went for takedowns in the 5th round just to hold him down and just tire him out. Like, he just could not put this guy away. So if Sean O'Malley goes out there and puts away Josh Emmett, that could bring a lot of comparisons. It could be great promotion for, not just a potential Sean O'Malley-Ilia Topuria fight, which I don't think is ever going to happen now, but a Sean O'Malley fight against, top opponents. Now, I think that Yair Rodriguez would be a great next fight after beating one of these opponents, because Yair Rodriguez sure as fuck does not deserve a title shot. I think the UFC still wants to do that just because they want a Mexican champ really badly. They're still trying to promote the sport over there so bad, even though right now is not the best time for Mexican MMA, in my opinion, and I say that as somebody who's Mexican. I don't think it's the most impressive time. You should probably have more events in Australia because they're having a renaissance of young talent and veteran talent and, up-and-comers. And now with JDM and Volk as champion, you could have a great event in Australia. Anyway, tell me what you guys think. Do you think that Merab is the bantamweight GOAT now? Do you think Dominik Cruz is the bantamweight? Do you think TJ? Do you think there's somebody else who's still the bantamweight GOAT? What do you think? Do you think maybe Aljo? Okay, and Who do you think should be next for Sean O'Malley? Do you think that he should stay at 135? Do you think he should move up a weight class? Some people have said he should retire. Now, I don't agree with that. I still think he has some good fights left in him, some good performances. But tell me in the comments what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe.